Hi everyone, my name is Natal Kalia, and today I'll be presenting on trade balance, economic theory, and government policies that influence the economy. Specifically, we will cover trade deficits and surpluses, classical versus Keynesian economic theory, and how monetary and fiscal policy can stabilize the economy. By the end of this presentation, you will have a clear understanding of how these concepts interact in the real world. So here is what we will cover today. First, we will discuss the trade deficits and trade surpluses, including realistic examples. And then we will look at the economic thinking before the 1930s and how the Keynesian economics changes the approach to the government interventions. Next, we will explain the differences between monetary and fiscal policy and how they are used to manage the economy. Finally, we will explore the business cycle, including the highest and lowest points and the difference between recursions and expansions. Um, so here we have the trade deficit. A trade deficit occurs when a country imports more goods and services than it exports. This means that more money flows out of the country to pay for foreign products. A common example is the United States, which imports large amounts of electronics, cars, and clothing from countries like China, Japan, and Germany. While trade deficit can improve customers with the cheaper goods and more variety, it can also put pressure on the domestic industries and increase the national debt if the president over time. Trade deficit are not inherently bad, but they require careful economic management. So here's the trade surplus. Trade surplus is like the opposite of the trade deficit. It occurs when a country exports more than it imports. In this case, money flows into the country. Countries like China, Germany often maintain trade surpluses because they export more cars, machinery, and electronics than they import. Trade surpluses strengthens the domestic industries, increasing the national income and supports income growth. However, if a country relies too heavily on exports, it becomes vulnerable if global demand declines. So here we have the trade balance. So currently the United States operates a trade deficit, especially in global like electronics and vehicles. However, the US maintain a trade surpluses in services such as finance, education, and technology. Several factors contribute to the deficit. First, the US dollar is strong, which makes importing cheaper. Second, the US have or like the Americans have a high demand for foreign goods. Third, much of the US production has been outsourced abroad. Despite running a trade deficit, the US economy remains globally competitive and strong. So here's the pre-1930s conventional wisdom. So before the 1930s, classical economists believed in what is known as Say's law, which says that supply creates its own demand. According to this view, the economy itself correcting in government intervention is unnecessary. Unemployment was seen as temporary and would resolve itself naturally. However, during the Great Depression, the theory failed. Millions remained unemployed for years, and markets didn't recover on their own, providing that the government interventions might actually be necessary during severe economic downturns. So the Keynes's economics. So here in 1936, John Keynes introduced a new economic theory that changed how economics viewed government intervention. Keynes argued that the economy can remain stuck with low demand and high unemployment. To stimulate the growth, government can increase spending, cut taxes, or even use deficit spending. The goal is to restore full employment and stabilize the economy. Unlike classical theory, Keynesian economic emphasis active government involvement to prevent the prolonged recessions. So the monetary policy is controlled by the Federal Reserve and involves the managing the money supply and interest rates to influence the economy. Key tools including changing the interest rates, um, buying or selling government securities, and adjusting reverse requirement for banks. For example, when the Federal Reserve lowers the interest rates, lowering and spending increasing, stimulating the economic growth. And like on the other hand, raising interest rates can slow the inflation, but may also reduce the investment. A recent example is the Fed lowering rate during the COVID-19 pandemic to encourage spending and support the economy. So the fiscal policy refers to government declines the decisions about spending and taxation. Um, Fiscal policy is used during recessions, such as increasing spending on infrastructures or cutting the taxes to boost demand. Um, the fiscal policy is used to slow inflation, which might involve reducing government spending or raising tax. For example, the CRES Act in 2022 provided stimulus checks and loans to support the household and business during the pandemic. Fiscal policy is essential for managing economic growth and stabilize employment rate. So what is a business cycle? Business cycle is it represents the natural rise and fall of economic activity over time. It has four phases: expansion, peak, recession, and through. The peak is the highest point of economic activity, with the maximum output and low unemployment. Um, the row is the lowest point when economic activity is the minimum before recovery begins. Understanding the business cycle helps the economists to and policy makers to anticipate changes and make appropriate action to stabilize the economy. So here's the recessions versus expansions. So a recession is a period of declining economic activity, typically lasting at least two quarters, with rising unemployment and reducing spending. As expansion, on the other hand, is the period of economic growth with increasing the GDP, low unemployment, and high customer confidence. For example, in the 2008 financial crisis was served recessions, while the period of 2010 um, to 2019 saw a long expansion before the COVID-19 pandemic disrupts the economy. So, in conclusion, to summarize all of this, the United States currently operates at a trade deficit, but the economy remains strong due to its trade surpluses and services. Classical economy theory assumed self-correcting markets, but Keynesian economics highlighted the importance of government interventions. Monetary and fiscal policies are crucial for managing inflation, unemployment, and growth. Finally, understanding the business cycle allowed policy markers to respond efficiently to economic changes, minimizing the impact to recessions and maximizing the benefits of expansions. Um, yes, that was it. Thank you.